Do you have the open meeting law?
Yes, I can say that piece. I want to let everybody on the call know that this is a public meeting. It's an open meeting, subject to the open meeting law in the state of Massachusetts. So you will be recorded and you'll be live streamed as well as available on the broadcast. So with that, I'll turn over to you, Olivia.
Thanks. All right, let's go through introductions. We'll start with Jucia.
Introduce yourself first.
Thank you very much, Olivia. This is Jucia Lebovskaya, or Jucia L for short. And I'm on the board, and I'm from Boston, Mission Hill specifically. Thank you.
Let's move on to Alice.
Okay. I'm Alice Fisher, and I'm new today, and I live in the South End. I'm an old-time disability activist from the 70s.
Excellent.
And I just
Welcome,
celebrated.
Alice.
Thanks. I just celebrated my 80th birthday.
Happy
And
birthday.
Happy birthday.
Thanks.
Okay, Carl.
He's on mute.
You're on mute, Carl. Oh, still on mute. Why don't we come back to Carl?
Okay. Leslie.
Hello, everyone. I am Wesley Ireland. My nickname is Wes. I am an advisory board member, and I live in the North End. And welcome, Alice, to your first meeting, and happy 80th birthday.
Thanks.
Paul.
Hello, I'm Paul Karen. I live in the West End, and I'm an advisory board member, and also work at the Bpda. Welcome, Alice.
And Elizabeth.
I'm Elizabeth Dean-Clower, Vice Chair of the Advisory Board. And again, Alice, welcome to the Advisory Board. We look forward to your participation.
And I now
Introduce-
have a microphone, I believe.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Carl.
And if,
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yes.
This is Carl. I'm sorry for the technical difficulties. I'm trying to make an old computer last until I get a new one. So this is Carl Richardson from Brighton, Massachusetts.
Awesome.
And welcome aboard, Alice.
Thanks.
Olivia, if I could just add, sorry, it's Elizabeth again. I think I forgot to say I'm from Back Bay.
Okay. And I am Olivia Richard. I'm the chair of the board, and I am from Brighton. So next on the agenda is some housekeeping. Just a reminder that if you're not speaking, please mute yourself. And next on the agenda is to welcome the new board member, Alice Fisher.
Oh, the same.
Welcome.
Thank you.
And Alice, you said that you were sworn in at City Hall?
Yes, I was, yes. And delighted to be here.
And you're also active with Age Strong, is that right? And you like to work on housing issues?
Yeah, I'm active with Age Strong and Age Friendly Boston. And I'm an activist in the LGBTQ community as well.
Great, we're excited to have you aboard.
We're thrilled to have you, Alice.
Thanks.
All right, let's move on to approval of March minutes. Do I hear a motion to approve the March minutes?
I make a motion to approve the March minutes.
Second.
I second
All
the
in
motion.
favor?
Aye.
Okay, motion approved by voice vote. And we have 2 presentations tonight. We'll start with the city department presentation. Michelle McCarthy from the Boston Public Health Commission.
I'm just going to jump in, Olivia. We did have to shift the schedule around a little bit because we have,
Okay.
we have Chief Martinez joining us from the Health and Human Services Cabinet. So I would like to turn it over to the chief to speak first, and then we'll have the presentation from the Bpda. Chief?
Perfect.
Thank you, Commissioner, and thank you, Olivia, for letting me be here with all of you. Again, my name is Marty Martinez, and I'm the Chief of Health and Human Services here in the city. And grateful to be able to be with you, and grateful to have Commissioner McCosh as part of, and the department as part of my cabinet and the work that we do. I'm just joining you briefly to talk about some of our COVID response efforts, and specifically to talk about the work we're doing around vaccines. As many of you know, we are focused on creating equitable access for the vaccine across our communities. As of about a week ago, our data is from the 15th, about 49% of Bostonians over the age of 16 have gotten at least 1 shot. So we are running a campaign, working hard to create access for residents, and we do that through 4 approaches that I want to make sure you're aware of, either for yourself, but also the larger community in general, so that we can ensure folks get access to the vaccine. So the 4 strategies that the city uses is a 4-pronged approach. The first is the mass vaccination sites. Those are sites that everybody knows about in the news. They are the Reggie Lewis Center in Boston. They are also the Heinz Convention Center in Boston. These are big sites where folks are able to get the vaccine. There are thousands of people get appointments at these vaccine sites every day, and they are vaccinating a lot of Bostonians across the city. The second strategy that we use is what we call priority group clinics. And these are clinics that are really targeted towards certain categories of individuals who became eligible. Obviously now everyone over the age of 16 is eligible to receive the vaccine. And so before that, we were working with priority clinics that helped us create access for folks. We're still working with priority clinics to try to create targeted access. For example, we're doing a vaccination clinic for grocery store workers this week, really trying to target those folks who are working in grocery stores, who have been working all through the pandemic, trying to ensure that we create access for folks. So we'll be doing that this week. In addition to the 2 strategies of mass vaccination clinics and the priority group clinics, the third are community-based clinics. These are clinics open to all residents in the city. There's about 26 clinics across the city where people can get vaccinated. Community health centers, in partnership with a variety of different organizations, faith-based organizations, community centers, as well as organizations that are connected to the city. And so we support these clinics by helping them get access to their location, by helping ensure they have vaccine, and they are community-based clinics and are an important part of the process. And then the fourth part, the fourth strategy in this approach is mobile clinics. That's where we're bringing clinics to people, because we know not everyone will be able to access clinics at these locations. So right now, what we have focused on up to now we've been working in partnership with our VHA development, Boston Housing Authority, and bringing clinics to people. We started with our senior buildings with people living with disabilities, trying to bring vaccines to individual locations so that we could create greater access. We, just to give you an example of that, over the past 11 days, we have vaccinated about 3,600 people through these mobile clinics. And we have been in almost every neighborhood across our city to create access for immigrants, to create access for folks harder to reach, to create access for folks who are not able to get vaccinated at those clinics. Those four strategies are the city strategy. In addition, we partner with the state. The state is running, had a little bit of a challenge because of the J&J, but the state is running a homebound vaccination program for folks who fit into that parameter based on state guidance so that individuals can request if they are approved to get vaccinated in their home. And we're also supporting hospitals and health centers who are also trying to vaccinate folks who are in their home who may be patients of a hospital or a health center. So for the city, it's really important to us that we create access across the board and that we do everything we can to make sure that there is not a barrier for people to get vaccinated. So we have a phone number and a website that's accessible for folks that's really trying to target those communities who've been disproportionately impacted. So at boston.gov/get vaccinated, it's boston.gov/get vaccinated. People can go on and fill out a form, and in that form they fill it out, and then someone would eventually call them to try to help them schedule an appointment. In addition, very specifically in an effort to target communities of color, we're also, people can call that number, which is 617-635-5555. It's 617-635-5555. And so this is all in an effort to create equitable access for communities and to do all that we can so that people can get vaccinated across different locations of the city. I want to give a special appreciation to Commissioner Mccarthy and her team who have been working to create access for home health needs, working to create access for individuals who may need additional support to get vaccinated, as well as ensuring that locations are accessible, and that we're working to ensure that if locations need support to ensure people with disabilities can get access, that we're trying to do that. We've had we've done things in advance to try to make them more accessible. We've also taken complaints where someone's gone to a site, it's not as accessible as it needs to be, and then we've partnered with that community provider who's running the site to talk to them about how to improve their services and their resources. So I know many of you as leaders in the community are doing important work. COVID has, obviously impacted every part of our life in this city, and it's challenged us in many, many ways. So I want to say as community leaders, thank you for the work you're doing on behalf of the community. We need all of our community leaders to continue to spread these messages and to continue to do all we can to keep people safe and healthy. And so I just really want to say, thank you for that. You can probably hear the thunder. I see some of the lightning that you're seeing. But thank you for that and for your work. And please, if there's more that we can do as a city, please let us know through my office and through Commissioner Mccarthy. We want to continue to make sure that we can get to the light at the end of this tunnel, get past COVID, and be able to do the many things that I know we all want to be able to do. So with that, I just want to say thank you again for allowing me to join you, and look forward to continuing to support your important work and appreciate any feedback you might have. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. Could I just ask a question about the mobile sites? Are they changing, and are they updated on the website as to when the new ones are opening?
Great question, Commissioner. So the mobile sites are changing very frequently, and we do try to update that regularly on the city's website. It's boston.gov. If you go city.boston.gov, make sure they send it to you. There's COVID vaccine locations in a map. They change pretty frequently. I will say we try not to do too much advertisement about all those sites because they get eaten up very quickly from folks outside of Boston. So we really do want to focus on Boston residents, but they do change pretty frequently. And one of the things we'd like to be able to do, Commissioner, is if there is a site or two that you think would be important to the advisory board or some other community leaders, we'd be glad to try to make a site accessible in another location. So we're moving them pretty frequently. This week, for example, we're in 6 different locations just this week. So we're going to continue to be able to do that. And I see that Sarah posted the link, so thank you for doing that, Sarah. I appreciate that.
One other quick question. Do any of these sites take walk-ins, or are they all appointment?
Great question. Many of the sites, the mobile sites, do take walk-ins. So that is happening. I know there's been so much talk about vaccines and lack of access, but pretty soon there's going to be a lot more appointments than there are people who want the shot. So that's coming. It's not yet, but it's coming. But right now, many of the sites do take walk-ins and they have availability. So if you know someone looking for a vaccine, please take a look at the city website because we will post when a site takes walk-ins. For example, there's a couple sites in Dorchester taking walk-ins this week. There'll be a site in South Boston that will be vaccinating with a few number of walk-ins on Saturday. So there's a lot of availability at some of these sites.
Wesley had a question.
Sure.
Yes, I do. Hello, Marty. Thank you so much for sharing an update with us. We really appreciate the information on the COVID vaccines and the site. So you did mention that some people were able to report complaints about access. Where do they report those to? Is there a website, or where do they make those reports? And what does that process look like for reporting a complaint?
Yeah, appreciate that question. People report concerns to a lot of places. So some folks will call 311 and they'll get an operator at 311 who will allow them to be able to connect to the mayor's health line. At the mayor's health line, someone can talk with an individual who may need to get express some concerns that they have. Some folks have used a service provider or a community organization and raised their complaint that way. And then the organization has reached out to the city to be able to do that as well. So that has been another way folks have done it. And then some folks have called the state to voice concerns or complaints about a site. And again, when a complaint comes in, the city, we look at it, we figure out what the challenge is, we try to connect back with the individual who made the complaint to figure out what the concern might be. So that ends up being an issue. And then we work through those details. So it's important to us that if people are feeling an experience that was not welcoming or accessible to them, that we know so that we try to address it. Because every provider wants to do their best. It doesn't mean that they're doing their best in the moment. So that's how that works.
Marty, I have a question. I have work at management and have patients with autism who have to areas, needles, and they usually are coming in with their parents or support person who can help them tolerate any kind of clinical situation. My question is, do you know of any of the sites that might do in-car, like if the patient is more comfortable staying in the car, like we did for testing, would they be able to do in-car vaccinations?
That's a great question, and I don't know of a site that currently is doing that, but I would be absolutely would look into that and have my team look into it. It's a really great point. We have had some situations where people have, a lot of the sites are open and public, and some have said they need sites where there's a little bit more privacy. So we've had to do some specific things like that. I think the one challenge is, as you know, if you've been vaccinated, you have to be monitored for 15 to 30 minutes afterwards. So sometimes the drive up or in the car is a challenge. But that's an excellent question you're raising, and I want us to look into it because we want to make sure that if there's a need for people to have assistance to get vaccinated, that's not the way other people are getting vaccinated, that we make that happen. So we'll look into that and follow up on that. I appreciate you raising that.
No, Elizabeth?
Thank you, sir.
Well, thank you for the update and your work, and certainly with the commissioner and her staff's input as well. If someone had suggestions for a particular site or population, what is the best way to get that information?
Yeah, if you could convey that information to Commissioner McCosh and the team, she'll absolutely follow up with us. We're in constant conversation about locations and sites and what we're doing, so we would welcome any input or feedback along the way.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Elizabeth. So let me just say thank you again to Commissioner and Olivia. Thank you for letting me be here with you, and please, if we can be a support or assistance as the city, let us know. On behalf of Mayor Janey, who is committed to making sure that we have equitable access, we want to do everything that we can. So please do pass along any feedback, and we will ensure to do our very best to try to address it. So thank you again, and thank you, Commissioner, for letting me be here. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Chief.
Thank you, Chief. All right. We will move on to Michelle McCarthy from the Boston Public Health Commission.
Hi, everybody. Michelle McCarthy. I'm actually from the Boston Planning and Development Agency. It would seem a little weird, the presentation I'm about to give, so I want to make sure to clarify that. And I'm sure Commissioner Martinez is probably like, who the heck is this? He does not work with the Public Health Commission. I'm Michelle McCarthy, Housing Policy Manager for the Bpda, here to talk about the agency's work around affirmatively furthering fair housing. So I'm going to share my screen. And for those of you doing interpretation, please, I tend to talk fast. Please stop me if I'm going too fast. I don't want anyone to feel as though I am communicating poorly. So let me try to get this up. And are folks able to see the presentation?
No.
How about now?
You can see it. Can everyone else see it?
Just a request to kind of describe what's on screen whenever possible.
Sure. So my talking points should describe what's on screen. If those of you feel like I'm not adequately describing it, if you can hold me accountable and help me out, that would be great. So this is just an opening slide, affirmatively furthering fair housing. Just wanted to say thanks for having me here today. I'm joined by my colleague, Sonal Gandhi, who is going to be able to answer your questions at the end of this, because I'm actually double booked for tonight. So thank you for having me here today. And I just want to provide some background on affirmatively furthering fair housing and demonstrate some of the tools the Bpda has created to help developers meet their affirmatively furthering fair housing obligations. So just a title slide on what is affirmatively furthering fair housing. Just wanted to provide a little background on what the city has done to implement AFFH through the Boston Zoning Code. So this slide shows a national overview of AFFH. Fair housing laws have been on the books since the Civil Rights Act of 1964. Most people are familiar with the anti-discrimination laws under the Fair Housing Act that make it illegal to discriminate against people in housing based on membership in a protected class. For example, I'm sure that all of us know that it's illegal to refuse to rent a vacant apartment to someone based on the color of their skin, because race is a protected class and rental decisions cannot be made on the basis of someone being a member of a protected class. People are often less familiar with the housing goals and requirements that are focused on the creation of inclusive communities, which has also been a part of fair housing law since 1968, and is what we're talking about when we talk about affirmatively furthering fair housing. Not only really gave substance to the AFFH rules in 2015, when it required jurisdictions receiving HUD funding to assess impediments to fair housing in their communities and develop plans for overcoming those impediments in coordination with HUD, who would provide review and oversight of both the assessment and each jurisdiction's plans. Unfortunately, those HUD rules were never fully realized and were gutted and then repealed during the previous presidential administration. But it is worth noting the current presidential administration has called for an examination of the impact of this repeal and is working to restore HUD AFFH rules, but is not quite there yet.
Michelle, could I ask you to describe the photos that are on screen as well?
Oh, sure. So this photo, this on the national overview slide is a photo from a civil rights era photo showing a group of folks protesting with signs that say full equality in housing and freedom is equal to housing too. It's a historic photo. So in our next slide, this is a timeline of AFFH in the city of Boston and features a slide of former Mayor Marty Walsh at a podium. So although Boston was no longer required to conduct an assessment of fair housing after the repeal of the HUD rules, the city made the decision to continue its fair housing work and use the AFFH structure provided by HUD to conduct a citywide assessment of fair housing starting in 2019. One of the over 100 recommendations that came from this work was a proposal that the Boston zoning code be amended to incorporate AFFH's principles into the Article 80 development review process. In December 2020, the Bpda board voted to approve the AFFH zoning amendments. This was followed by an adoption by the Zoning Commission in January of this year. And now, just a month ago on March 15th, the AFFH zoning amendments went into effect, making Boston the first city in the country to incorporate AFFH concepts into the development review process. Now large projects in planned development areas featuring a residential component must comply with AFFH requirements. So this is a title slide that says affirmatively furthering fair housing zoning amendment. I just wanted to move on here to the substance of AFFH in Boston and to take a quick look at the zoning amendment. This is a slide showing a quote from the Boston zoning code. I won't read the quote because it's lengthy, and the content of the slide helps to provide the context. As conceived of by HUD, AFFH is really a three-legged stool that over time supports the creation of affirmatively integrated communities. The first leg is the assessment component, which focuses on determining the barriers to fair housing that exist within a given area. The second leg is figuring out which actions to take to overcome the barriers revealed by the assessment. And the third leg is a review and oversight component intended to confirm that the assessment was properly conducted and the proposed actions are appropriate. HUD took the three-legged stool approach and applied it into entire communities receiving HUD funding. The AFFH zoning amendments shrink down the AFFH process and apply the three-legged stool approach to the Article 80 development review process as it applies to large projects in planned development areas. So this is a slide that provides an overview of what the AFFH zoning amendments do and contains an image that's a screenshot of the city's website that says Boston to become first major city in the nation to include fair housing requirements in zoning code. I don't want to go over all of the new definitions in the code today, so here is a high-level overview of what the AFFH amendments seek to accomplish. Really, the AFFH amendments do three important things. First, they integrate AFFH principles into the development review process and make AFFH within the scope of Article 80 development review, along with topics like urban design, transportation, environment, infrastructure, etc. Second, they establish and detail the AFFH assessment component. I'll go over the specifics of this in just a moment, but in general, the AFFH amendments have empowered us to create a methodology for assessing the fair housing components of a project and to create a structure for requiring projects to implement specific kinds of strategies, which we're calling intervention options, for meeting the city's AFFH goals. This component covers legs 1 and 2 of the AFFH three-legged stool. Finally, the AFFH amendments establish what we're calling the Boston Interagency Fair Housing Development Committee. I'll be going over this in a moment as well, since this is the group that will really be shaping how AFFH is implemented by developers and is the body that provides oversight and review of AFFH under the zoning amendments. This is a title slide that says AFFH assessment component. For me, I think the AFFH assessment component and how it has been realized is the most exciting part of the BPDA's AFFH work, because it's where a lot of the more creative work has been done around creating tools that will help both the BPDA and developers fulfill their obligations under the zoning code. This is a slide that says AFFH assessment tool form with a screenshot of a couple pages of the form. As part of the AFFH assessment component, developers have to complete and submit an AFFH assessment form, which asks them to describe current and recent past uses at the project site, with a strong focus on actual residential displacement that might take place or has already taken place as a result of proposed development. We also asked for specific details on unit mix and affordability, including how many units will meet the inclusionary development policy. Finally, we asked developers to look at 2 tools that we have created to assess historical exclusion and displacement risk within a quarter mile of the project site, and select the intervention options the developer will use to mitigate historical exclusion and displacement risk. This is a title slide that says Historical Exclusion Map and Housing and Household Composition Community Profile Report. So I'm going to provide a demonstration of this map and tools. So let me stop sharing my screen for a moment so I can bring up the page with the tools on them. A second here. Okay, so I hope everyone's seeing a map of the city of Boston. So this is a map that integrates 2 important functionalities for AFFH. So the first is a historical exclusion map. So that the first component of that is the ability to turn on a historical exclusion layer and offered a visual that shows relative amounts of historical exclusion throughout the city. So there's the greener, a light colored green, a lighter green color that shows less historical exclusion, and a darker blue color that shows a greater amount of historical exclusion. So that's one part of the functionality of this tool. The second part is the ability to generate a housing and household composition community profile report for a project.
Michelle.
And that can, yes.
Before you move on from this image, could you just mention the neighborhoods that are highlighted for people who can't see the colors?
Sure. So the neighborhoods that are highlighted in darker blue are parts of Jamaica Plain, West Roxbury, Roslindale, parts of Hyde Park, the Neponset area of Dorchester, a section of Brighton, and then I think that's it. A little bit of down of the Back Bay as well, or Beacon Hill. Sorry.
Can you tell the board what historical exclusion means?
Sure. So the historical exclusion was created by this map was created by the Bpda research department using 5 factors: zoning data, assessing data, the year 2000 demographic data, 2018 demographic data, and affordable housing data, with the majority of the data coming from either the American Community Survey or from city sources. And so the neighborhoods I didn't list are showing relatively lesser amounts of historical exclusion, but are not, which is not to say there are no pockets where there's no historical exclusion. It's just a relative weighting factor.
Just to put it in a little more lay terms, that means that these are neighborhoods where traditionally certain protected classes of people weren't able to buy or rent housing. Is that correct, Michelle?
That's correct. So you'll see that the darker blue areas, or the neighborhoods that were listed as darker blue areas, are neighborhoods where there's less multifamily apartment buildings and things like that, as one example of what might lead to historical exclusion. So in terms of being able to generate the report, that can be done either by entering an address in or picking a site on the map. So I'm going to just pick a site on the map to demonstrate the tool. So what's happening here is you're zoomed in with the dot representing the project and the circle representing a quarter mile from the project site. And then the highlighted areas are all the block groups that are within that quarter mile radius circle. So I'm just gonna generate a report here. And this is a report that developers will be required to look at and use when they complete their AFFH assessments. So this report shows a closer look at the historical exclusion at the project site within that quarter mile, using the same color scheme. It's just you're looking at it at a little bit more closer detail. So this project area that I've selected in Jamaica Plain, just as a example, is showing a moderate level of historical exclusion. The rest of the report is a bunch of information about household characteristics and demographics and qualities of the actual units in the project area. So the top part is Boston household characteristics, and this is going to show people who are rent burdened and compares that to compares the project area to the city as a whole. It also shows the number of income restricted units as well as the number of units that are utilizing a housing voucher from the BHA. The second section shows amounts of the household income in the city as a whole, as well as the project area, and offers a comparison there. The third section is household composition characteristics. So this is things like married couples living together, households with children under 18, and households with a member having a disability. Next, we see unit sizes. So the unit sizes in the project area, the ratio of those compared to the ratio of those in the Boston area as a whole. Household size, similar compare and contrast. And then finally, race and ethnicity. So this is a lot of information that developers will look at. They'll take it in, both with regard to the project site where they're developing, comparisons to the city as a whole, and they'll use the data found in this report to answer some of the questions on the AFFH assessment form to figure out where barriers might exist to fair housing. So I'm going to stop sharing this and go back to the presentation. So just give me a second. When this comes up, this is again the title slide that says Historical Exclusion Map and Housing and Household Composition Community Profile Report. This is the title slide that says AFFH Assessment Component, Intervention Options and Intervention Enhancements. So now that we've looked at some of the tools for assessing and identifying barriers to fair housing at and around the project site, the next step is to look at some of the strategies for overcoming those barriers. To provide some structure regarding how developers might create a strategy for meeting AFFH goals and requirements, we've created a list of specific intervention options and intervention enhancements that developers may select from with some minimum selection requirements. So this is a slide that shows two categories of intervention options. The first is Article 80 intervention options, and the second is marketing and housing access options. And I apologize, this is a very text-heavy slide, but the talking points will hopefully summarize it. Under the zoning code, developers must commit to an AFFH strategy that is proportional to the size, scope, and impact of the proposed project on the surrounding community, as well as the level of historical exclusion and level of displacement risk within a quarter mile of the proposed project. To assist developers to meet those requirements in a way that is flexible and adaptive to community needs, we established three categories of intervention options. The slide shows the Article 80 or development review options and the marketing and housing access options. All projects subject to AFFH must select a minimum of one of each of these options. The Article 80 options are about the housing units themselves and involve things like additional or more affordable IDP units, so inclusionary development units, or adding larger size units for families, partnering with a housing authority, CDC, or land trust to create more affordability on site. The marketing and housing access options are about who gets to live in housing and involve things like preferences for a specific kind of tenant or buyer, as well as a commitment to use or exceed best practices in marketing and tenant selection. It's worth noting here that AFFH is not about adding more IDP units or other kinds of affordable housing. AFFH is about making sure everyone has access to the kinds of housing they need in the neighborhood they want to live in. So some of these options can and should apply to market rate units. This is another text-heavy slide that shows the third category of intervention options, as well as what we're calling intervention enhancements. The third category of intervention options we're calling supplemental process options. These are very impactful options intended for very impactful projects. Since supplemental process options are not required and are intended to be uniquely tailored to address a specific community concern, we've offered some examples of the form supplemental process options may take rather than a list of options to choose from. And then finally, we have intervention enhancements, which are additional requirements for very large projects called planned development areas and projects in areas of high historical exclusion or where there's high displacement risk. So this is the title slide that says Boston Interagency Fair Housing Development Committee. After the AFFH assessment and development plan for overcoming the barriers to fair housing is identified in the AFFH assessment, the final leg of the AFFH three-legged stool is the review and oversight component, which is the responsibility of the newly created Boston Interagency Fair Housing Development Committee. The committee was created by the AFFH zoning amendments is comprised of one member each from the Boston Planning and Development Agency, the Department of Neighborhood Development, the Boston Housing Authority, the Office of Fair Housing and Equity, and the Mayor's Commission for Persons with Disabilities, for a total of 5 members. The committee's main role is to review the AFFH portions of a proposed project and recommend that the Bpda board adopt the proposed AFFH strategies and allow the agency to enter into agreements that permit the Bpda to monitor and enforce AFFH commitments. At a more granular level, the committee will be responsible for determining when the proportionality requirement of the AFFH zoning amendments is met. This means there will often be times when the committee recommends that the developer select more than the minimum number of intervention options in order to match a project's impact with the impact of an AFFH strategy. So this is the second to last slide, just summarizing some key points. The AFFH effective date was March 15th, 2021, so just a little over a month ago. The zoning amendments apply to large projects with a housing component. We are very concerned about community input or community consideration at and around the project site. We want interventions to be proportional based on the project size, scope, and impact on the community. And AFFH is not just about affordable housing. Really just want to reiterate that. I think it's an important point to note that AFFH should be holistically applied to projects. And then finally, the city of Boston is the first in the country to have added AFFH policies and procedures to its zoning amendment. So it's exciting to be the first doing it, but it's also a little daunting because there's going to be a lot of lessons learned. So this is just our final slide. Just want to say thank you and that we're happy to answer your questions.
Michelle, would I be able to just give a brief overview just in a little bit more lay terms? Just because I know that there was text heavy, I just want to tell the board just the basic concept of this program, which is that—
That'd be great.
Thank you. It is just really working to address the fact that for years and years, people with disabilities, people of color, people of low economic status were kept out of certain neighborhoods in Boston, and we own that, and we're working to fix it. So what this is doing is it's every big project that comes in, and Michelle, please jump in if I get the facts wrong, but every big project that comes in and asks permission to be built in the city that includes housing is going to have to review the plan and look at protected groups that are in the area, look at any people who are being displaced. So if it's a housing unit that is being built, if they're knocking down a housing unit to rebuild a unit, they have to look at how many people are being displaced in the area and then do all kinds of assessments about the housing that they're proposing to build. And then we'll review it, this team that Michelle talked about, and the developers will be required to pick two interventions that they will do. One of them is with the building they're making, and that could be any of the options from, like Michelle said, making more 3-bedroom units, which will allow families to live there, or building out more accessible units for people who have mobility devices, which will allow more people with disabilities to live there. Things like that, which are really sending the message, theoretically, but also actually, that you are welcome to live in this neighborhood, and we're not excluding anybody. And then the second option that they have to do is to pick one of the marketing tools, which is also going to increase access to this particular development. Like, you have to market it specifically to disability organizations, or you have to reach out to neighborhood groups for persons of color and let them know about these opportunities. And then we will review the plan, and then they will have to implement it. So like Michelle said, this is the first type of plan in the country. And what we hope you will do is look at these plans, and I can alert you of new developments that are coming on board, and make public comments. Like, tell them what you want to see, tell them what you think about it, and any things that you would like to add to the development, if that makes sense. And I think Michelle had to drop off, but Sanal is still on board. And can you let me know if you'd like to add anything, or if I did a good job summarizing it? I know we deal in this world of technical issues with housing all the time, but even when I was just listening to it, I'm like, okay, I think I know what we're saying, but I'm not quite sure. So I just wanted to bring it down to a little bit more terms that people who aren't involved in working on housing would understand. Sanal?
Yeah, no, thank you so much, Kristen. I think you did it perfectly well. I know it's a lot of text and a lot of material, especially for those of you who are not familiar with the development review process in Boston. But the basic kind of talking points here and kind of layman's terms is we want to make sure that we have access to housing for everyone in the city of Boston. And it was really important through this process for us to include the Disabilities Commission in the conversation as part of our committee. And so, a lot of folks here might know about the accessibility checklist that's been in place since 2014. So for this commission, one of the things we did that was really important for us, and that we are extremely, with all humility, very proud of, is that we took an existing checklist that has been improved upon since 2014, that has been board approved by the Bpda to be part of the review process, and now that is a requirement of the zoning code. So what was a checklist for requirements, for developers to fill out, is now a requirement. It is not just you should do it because it's a checklist. It is a requirement of the zoning code, and that basically says, we're being as inclusive as possible. And Kristen, you intervention option really well. But happy to answer all your questions in the chat.
Just one more point to add before we take questions is that when we talk about people being historically excluded, we know, because our interest is persons with disabilities, but we know the challenges that people with disabilities have always faced, whether it's no accessible units, or not knowing about units, or being of lower economic status because of other mitigating factors that contribute to people with disabilities not being able to get jobs, or not being able to have financial mobility. So we really are thrilled to be part of this project, and we're hoping, with comments from the board, that developers will really think about adding some of the accessibility features, like making more built-out units instead of the required 5, maybe they'll do 6 or 7. And then also, like with the marketing, like I said, reaching out to organizations that work with people who have disabilities to let them know about these opportunities. So Olivia, I'll turn it over to you.
All right, let's kick it off with Wesley.
Sure. I'm happy that the commissioner was able to answer a lot of my questions. I think breaking it down into layman's terms was really helpful, but I do have a few more questions. I guess I will throw all of them out there and then see if either a commissioner or someone else can answer these for me. So during the presentation, there was no mention about people with disabilities. I'm assuming that the presentation was linked to accessibility, just in general. So I just wanted to see if this links in with disabilities. And then my other question, Michelle mentioned that the commissioner, the disabilities group, at sorry, that just froze for me. Erica, can you see him?
Elizabeth.
So people are from so people from the BIFC.
The BIFC, we know what
includes
that is.
the commission with the people with the Commission for Disabilities group. So I'm assuming, is that correct, Commissioner?
Yep, we know what he's saying. Okay, so is that your whole question? Yep, so Sonal, maybe you could help with the acronyms because I forget what it stands for, but BIFDIC is the group of agencies that is working to review this checklist, and we are part of it. That's correct, Wesley. And Sonal, could you just go over the other 4 agencies?
Absolutely. So thank you, Wesley. It's BIFDIC, Boston Interagency Fair Housing Development Committee. And because this is development focused, and also making sure that we have a very strong focus on access to housing for all classes, all public classes, we have the Boston Planning and Development Agency. So Michelle, who you met earlier, was staffing this committee. The Department of Neighborhood Development is part of the committee. The Office of Fair Housing and Equity is on this committee. The Commissioner Mccarthy is on this committee. And the 5th is Boston Housing Authority. So we want to make sure that we have a full committee, a full staff to look at housing across the city. And it's staffed with the Bpda and housed at the Bpda. I think you had 2 more questions. Did I answer your question?
For the internet, nobody could search things, whatever.
Yes, you did. Thank you.
Okay.
And then my other 2 questions are related with what the commissioner just mentioned about financial mobility for people with disabilities. And my issue with that is that some people with disabilities do have an income and others do not have a stable income. And so I know that this is an issue, especially with housing through BD, Boston Development. I forget the acronym already, but I know that this is a huge barrier on an economic level because, some of the criteria for AMI is, the reason why I'm asking this is people with disabilities, really depend on their income. And so I'm concerned, what happens to the people in the middle class? I think that there should be some focus on this, especially for the disabilities group, and making sure that we're able to address these issues.
I can speak to that. So AMI, for people who are not familiar with that term, is area median income, I believe, and Sonal, please jump in if I'm saying it wrong. But that basically is like income guidelines. So people with like 20% or 30% of AMI would be a lower income, and some housing is dedicated just for that group of people. But Wesley, there are also tiers of AMI where some of the housing goes up to 80%, 100%, and 120% of AMI. So if the AMI for an area is, say, $50,000 worth of income for a single person, you could still make more than that and still be eligible for the housing. And this is just for the IDP units, which stands for inclusionary development. Every development has to have a certain percentage of these housing units, which are considered quote-unquote affordable. We know affordable is a very vague term because sometimes what is classified as affordable doesn't really seem affordable. But Wesley, there's also plenty of market rate units for people with disabilities who work and have an income. And I know that that's probably seems like it's been overlooked, but it really hasn't been, because each development is required to make 5% of their units built out for persons with disabilities. And also 2% of the units have to be built out for people who are, have sensory disabilities, like blind or deafness. So those are standard. Every single development builds those out, and they're only required to have one such unit as be part of the IDP units. So to summarize, basically, there'll be 5% wheelchair accessible units, 2% units that have deaf and blind accessibility features, and out of all of those, only one will be required to be affordable. So we've worked really hard on that, because previous to all this work, none of them were required to be affordable. So we're telling developers now at least one of the accessible units for sensory and mobility has to be part of the affordable package. And then when you talk about BHA, all of their housing is affordable. So we don't have any really market rate units in BHA, but there are plenty of market rate units for middle class and other people who are wishing to get such housing. Is that right, Sonal?
Yeah, that's perfectly right. And I would just add that D&D is a big part of the housing kind of world in the city of Boston as well. And the Department of Neighborhood Development also has a big role in funding affordable housing and income restricted housing. And the word affordable housing is it's kind of vague and squishy, because affordable to one is not affordable to the other. So the way we look at it is through AMIs. So Commissioner McCosh correctly pointed out the 20%, 30%. And for the middle income, we're really looking at 80 to 120% of AMI. But there are many different agencies across the city that are looking to, meet the goal of 69,000 housing units by 2030, and at different levels of affordability, and also making sure that the market rate units that are created it's not all market rate units. We have at least a certain percentage, a minimum of at least 13%, if not more, of IDP units on site for Bpda developments. But D&D also funds developments. They also have a lot of land that they RFP out for housing. And then BHA, a lot of people are familiar with BHA housing as well. And BHA is also developing and also improving their commitment as we speak.
And one other important factor to note is that people with disabilities can still apply for any of these units. They don't only have to apply for a sensory unit or a mobility unit. And once they get a unit, they can ask for reasonable modifications to be made in that unit. So the developer or the owner or manager would have to make accommodations within the unit. So we're not certainly limited to those 5% or 2%. All of the units are open for persons with disabilities, and then modifications can be made after people are housed.
In the interest of time, Ducia and then Elizabeth.
Yeah, thank you very much. Sorry, this is Ducia again. Thank you so much, Michelle and Zanal, for your presentation. When I was looking at your, when I was looking at your PowerPoint, I kept thinking about what I learned in one of my science courses, like, I don't know, last semester, I think, like statistics and all the, what has been accomplished throughout the years. And I don't think I have really a question. It's more like a thought, brainstorming kind of, that comes to my mind. I mean, I don't know, maybe I shouldn't be saying this or wondering about this. I think what I'm trying to say is, I know that you're looking for feedback. Have you, like, I know that a lot of times when the companies are developing new apartment complexes and whatnot, and they want to know what works, especially accessibility related. Usually they have like these town meetings or another like for residents who live nearby and see what their ideas are, because I know accessibility changes throughout the years. Like there's some things that were ADA related, like the ADA started 1991, but people have had accessibility needs since forever. And there's some things that were not as relevant in, let's say, 1980, and now they're more relevant. And even though people live in those places since maybe 20 years, but they can't really afford to move into a place where it has actually the accessibility needs that they have. And what I'm thinking along the line is, like, have you reached out to like housing places and like, I don't know, did a survey or something, like asking what kind of needs do you have? I mean, I don't know, like town meeting or something like that. I don't know.
Ducia, I can speak to the first part and then I'll hand it over to Sanal.
Mm-hmm.
So just so you know, this AFFH is not the only tool by any means that we look at accessibility. We have the accessibility checklist that Sanal mentioned earlier, and that's a very thorough, robust list of accessibility features. So we have housing experts in so many departments in the city. We have Bpda, we have staff in my office who review the checklist, D&D, Department of Neighborhood Development, we work with BHA, and there are architects and engineers in all of those departments. So we really get a lot of input on the latest accessibility features that we should be working on. And my office has a direct line to all of these projects. So anything that you would think of, you could always let me know. But on top of that, there are also always public meetings. So I wanted to know if Sanal could mention that. And just so everybody probably knows now, it's so much easier to attend public meetings because we have interconnectivity now and we can do it from home. But that being said, part of my job, what I want to do to link the board in more moving forward, is to let you know about projects and let you know when you can make comments. So Sanal.
Yeah, thank you. So that's a great point to say. Thank you so much for making that point. So access to processes and public comment is extremely important. We are always open to learning more and getting better and being up to date with not just the code and requirements, but being up to date what the needs are of all our populations is extremely important to us. And then being really, really inclusive. I mean, one of the side effects, I guess, of COVID, of the pandemic, is we've gone on Zoom, and we've actually seen a really, really big uptick in meeting attendance because people can attend meetings online as opposed to coming in person. And so what was really important to us through the zoning amendment process, which is the only thing we're talking about today, there are so many other venues where this can be done, but the zoning amendment process was very important to us, that we enacted this through existing processes. And the existing processes for all Article 80 projects that undergo Bpda review have public meetings as part of the review. So you may have seen ads in the local paper or on website or email lists for public meetings in your neighborhood for projects in your neighborhood. And please attend those. Please attend those. Please ask your friends to attend them, because we're always looking for as many people as possible to attend those meetings because really feedback is what guides a project. And, people, not everything that is talked about can get accomplished, but that's okay. But to not have had the input of folks who are being impacted would be a shame, a tragedy. Right. So we always want to make sure that as many people as possible can be included and be heard in our processes. For every large project, there is an opportunity for the public to comment, to come to a meeting, and to comment both in this forum or when we go back in a live forum, and also in writing. And those written comments make their way into documentation that developers respond to. And then our board, the Bpda board, will also look at those comments. So we encourage everyone to participate both in person and also in writing through our public processes.
One final note on that, the Bpda did a lot of work on their website very recently, and they made a ton of accessibility improvements. So, the website's very accessible, it's easy to use now, it's user-friendly, and there's a very clear place to add comments, and you can also review every step of the project along the way, from the beginning proposal to the changes in the proposal to all the public comments are available on the website, and then like what stage the development's in and the conclusion. So yes, Ducia, there's plenty of opportunity for public comment, and we want public comment.
Thank you very much, Christopher Constanzano. I apologize. I think I was trying to get clarity and I wasn't really sure how to articulate it, but thank you so much.
Okay, Elizabeth, and then we have to move on.
Yes, that was helpful to hear, to have a presentation on this topic. And Commissioner, your user-friendly summary was very helpful. Particularly if you're seeking public comment for such a presentation, I think both having, if you are using a PowerPoint, that it's helpful to have a simplified version that isn't so text heavy or has some very, recognizable bullet points, and that therefore when it's read off of, for people who aren't able to see the visual, whether you can see the visual and it's just a wall of text or you can't, I think that would really help facilitate the dialogue. And then one quick question either for you or the commissioner is, if when I saw the different categories where the project would need to fulfill at least one of the list of, like the one that was about market options, and then there were the two others that, so for this, I know the commissioner, you had pointed out that this is not the only tool for accessibility, but hypothetically, someone doing such a project could go through and make a selection that in this particular channel wouldn't necessarily include disability. So it would fall back on the laws, the 5%, et cetera.
I would say yes and no. So yes, this is not the only tool for advocating for more access. But no, it really never reverts just to the laws. Every department who touches a project always pushes for more than minimum access. So I know we work very closely with the person who does the marketing plans for housing, Alexis. She works in D&D, and she really has a disability lens. So, there are requirements for marketing which have a lot of accessibility requirements, and she makes sure she holds them to the fire for that, and then she asks for more. The accessibility checklist always asks for more. And developers know in order to get approval, not only to get approval, they have to meet all the requirements, but to get real support from the community and really goodwill, they want to do more than the bare minimum. They really do. And for the most part, we never get pushback on the things that we ask for. Like Sanal said, they're not going to be able to do everything, but certainly they take our input seriously and they work on the issues that they can. So don't feel like the city's ever settling for the bare minimum. And the bare minimum is pretty good. because it's come so far, but still, we always push for more. I hope that answers your question.
Yes, and that we look forward to having the advisory board having notice ourselves in advance. Thanks.
I'd also encourage everyone to look at our website. All the materials that were discussed today, the PowerPoint, the tool that Michelle demonstrated, they're all on our website. So, take a look at it. It's kind of the tool that she demonstrated. Put your house on that, little and generate a report. Everyone does that. I've done it 1,000 times. It's really cool. A lot of national attention has been paid to it. We've been asked to speak on nationally about this. And we're really excited to have Boston be one of the first cities in the country to do this. And it'll only get better with your input and your support. So please take a look at our website, take a look at the materials, reach out to either Michelle or myself or Commissioner Mccarthy at any time with any questions. We just, we're not perfect, but we're trying our best, to make strides here.
So now, could you put your website in the chat?
Yeah.
Thanks. Olivia?
All right. Thank you, Sonal. Thank you, Bpda, for a great presentation. Let's move on to the chair report. I only have two things. Number one is if you don't subscribe to the Disability Commission's newsletter, I strongly suggest you get on the list because there was a notice put out that the parking regulations are going back to pre-COVID status. So if you drive or if you have a personal care attendant or a healthcare professional who drives to your house and parks, just be aware that they're going to be tightening back up on parking tickets and towing. Also, the other thing is the 25th annual Marie Felton Award Ceremony is going to be May 20th from 7 to 8 p.m. It's going to be virtual again. I strongly encourage people to buy tickets to support the State Independent Living Coalition through the Marie Felton Award. And I look forward to seeing the awardees this year. That's it for me.
Next on the agenda.
Next, the commissioner's report.
Great, thanks, Olivia. I don't have a whole lot to report this month either. I do just want to take a minute to acknowledge the events that we all know are happening throughout the country. With the George Floyd verdict last night, it was really great to see that due process was done, and it was a fair assessment of what happened. So with that, we know that there's been the whole case has caused a lot of pain and trauma to a lot of communities. So Mayor Janey is really committed to listening and to acknowledging the events that have happened there across the country and even things that are happening in Boston. And we're really trying to take ownership and work on equity. The mayor is committed to an equitable reopening, and we've been doing a lot of work on that. We have an equity cabinet in the city with a newly appointed equity chief, Selena Barrios Miller, I believe is her name. She's been with the city for a long time. She's great. So we're really excited to work with her. And as you know, we have a mayoral election coming up, and so far all of the candidates who've announced they're running are persons of color. So we know things are changing. We know we still have a lot of work to do, but the city is here. We're committed to keeping people safe, and we haven't heard of any types of violence after the verdict, so that's a good thing. And we are, like I said, we're continuing to work on the issues and continuing to listen, to make sure our residents are doing well, and committed to equity as we move forward. So with that, I will just give a brief update on some of the things I'm working on. Chief Martinez talked about vaccines, so I don't think I need to talk too much about that, except to say that we're continuing to work on accessibility of the sites, including the mobile sites. So please check the website for vaccines and spread the word to the community. Please, we use you as a conduit to get this word out to your neighbors, friends, and networks, so please spread the word on vaccines. And I'm sure you all know that everybody is now eligible. We did push very hard to get people with disabilities prioritized. Unfortunately, that wasn't able to happen. But like the chief said, we'll very soon be at a point where we're going to have more vaccines than people who want them. So now is the time to get the word out about vaccinations. Another note I want to ask you again to get the word out about is the Disability Census that is part of the city annual resident listing. And Sarah, if you're still on, maybe you could put that in the chat. And basically, for anyone who doesn't know, it's the city does an annual resident listing census to see who lives in the city, and they count everything, every person, they even count pets. And so a few years ago, we were able to add on a survey about disability status. So this will really help us get a picture of what types of people with disabilities live in the city, numbers, so we can serve our residents better. Following up on the equitable recovery for the city in reopening, we are continuing our outdoor dining program. Restaurants are now open, there's dining outside. Luckily, the weather has been fairly nice, no snow at least. So we are still giving out our ramps for portable ramps for temporary access to outdoor dining, and continuing to monitor for any problems that come up with dining. And then just two other things I want to mention. The Success Link program is now open, and that is our youth summer jobs program. So if you know any youth or you work with any organizations who work with youth, let them know that they can sign up at Success Link. And Sarah, if you can put that link in the chat too, please do. And if Sarah can't do that, we will email out everybody with these links. But basically, I'd love you to spread the word that youth with disabilities are encouraged to apply. A lot of the jobs this year will be virtual, so that will remove some of the barriers. And we can also work with teens who may not have access to digital platforms, and we can help with that. So then the last thing I have to talk about is, actually, the other things I have to follow up on are under old business. So I can end my report there. If anyone has any questions, I'm happy to answer them. Nope, okay.
All right.
Is it old business now?
Elizabeth raised her hand.
Okay.
I guess this is more of a comment than a question. I just wanted to follow up to the advisory board and the public who may be tuning in that in collaboration with the MBTA ride program, that the RTAG, Riders Accessible Transportation Group, has for people who already took the ride or are eligible to be on the ride, meaning that they've already, let me back up and say this better, that for people who want to go to, for vaccine purposes in particular, that it's the ride pilot, the use of Uber and Lyft vehicles to go to and from vaccine sites, or for one other round trip, two other individual trips for whatever purpose, that those who already belong to the pilot or are eligible by virtue of being RIDE clients, that this has been added. We recognize that there is an issue with, in some parts of the day, with the challenge of finding an Uber or Lyft vehicle as punctually as it had been. That needs to be factored into the trip. But if anyone has follow-up, excuse me, I just need to get water. If anyone has any follow-up questions or comments, you can contact me or RTAG, and we'll try to get that information out. But we're hoping that that's another way of helping more people access them for who won't be receiving them through these other channels.
Okay. I think it's time. Are we doing an architectural access report today?
We're going to reinstate that next month.
Okay. Then let's move on to old business.
So we have several things that we've been working on. And the first thing I wanted to loop back with is the letter for the vaccine priority. And I know, Elizabeth, that you were working on a draft. I want to say that I apologize for our office not being more supportive. We've been short-staffed because Jessica left in February, so we're working on replacing that position. But I wanted to get an update from Elizabeth and the rest of the board on the status of the letter and what you would like to do with it.
It was last left, shortly after our last meeting, I believe, I sent it out, or to a subset of people who were on the committee, and Carl thought that he had another approach.
Yeah, I did volunteer, so I'll tell you what, I will commit to having a draft to you by Monday.
Okay, great. And we can recirculate that, and then I can get it right out. And even though it may be past time to prioritize people with disabilities, I think it's still important that, you took a vote on it, you want to make your voices heard, and your opinion really carries a lot of weight. So to say that, you may want to change the tone a little bit, Carl, to, we've realized that, something like that, like in retrospect.
We have to change the tone, and we also have to change, like, people can't get out because it's too cold and the ramps are frozen. So, yeah, we're gonna have to change a little bit of the letter. I've read the letter several times. I just have been swamped with, I don't have any excuses. I've been swamped with work that I did agree to help Elizabeth, and I haven't come through yet, but I will. I have a wide open weekend. I should be able to get to it this weekend, and I'll get it to Elizabeth by Monday, and Elizabeth, you can send it to the commissioner.
Okay, great. When I think similarly that for the block of time when it first came up for discussion, I, about what Carl was saying, there was some other commitments that I hadn't gotten it forwarded as punctually as I had hoped by a long. It wasn't close to what I had originally hoped. But also, I think I had a misunderstanding about the content of the letter, which has subsequently been clarified, that although the Arlington letter was going to be a template once we saw that they had produced one, they also at an earlier point had, talked about some features they had found. But I think now, based on what we've heard today from the chief and what from Chief Martinez and what what's going on, that I do think, it will. There's a few things that will change, but that it's still important to have said something. And that similarly, Commissioner, that I, just as a point of clarification, since we're talking about the letter, that not so much for the letter purpose, but how does the advisory board, or are there ways through at your level of leadership to know what people are still getting missed? For instance, somebody, a colleague of mine on another board who's blind but very technologically savvy was still having difficulty booking an appointment, even as late as within the last, say, 2 or 3 weeks, and then finally was able to iron that out. But because parts of the website, the Mass.gov website were still, or individual, maybe it was the Gillette site, some of them were still at sections that he needed a sighted person to read because they weren't accessible.
Yeah,
I think
so,
that's
yeah. I mean, all the ways that the chief talked about, we're working on equity. People with disabilities are a part of all of our planning. But for people who have technology challenges or don't have a web platform, don't have internet access, there is a phone number, and it's simple. It's 211 if you're outside of Boston, 311 if you're in Boston. And they have people who will talk you through the process and help you schedule an appointment. So,
and hopefully that's gotten better over time, because I know people who tried that very process.
yeah, we can only hope.
It's evolving.
Right, but everybody is working on it. You can rest assured of that.
Oh, yeah, no, there's no question, and we greatly appreciate
Okay,
the input
great.
you've had.
So speaking of other things that still, like I said, because we're short-staffed, Wesley, I don't have any updates yet on the caption ordinance. I know we work with IGR, the Intergovernmental Relations Office, and everybody's just been so busy because of the mayoral transition last month, but hopefully things will open up soon. And we're also trying to, the outdoor dining opened last month, so the restaurants were really busy with that. So we wanted to let them, I thought we could let them get set up, and we know that was their priority right now. So hopefully in the next few weeks, both IGR and the businesses will have more time to think about this issue. So we will work with IGR to get that city council hearing. And then the other update I want to give is on City Hall Plaza. Especially Elizabeth, I know you were particularly interested in this. Again, with the mayoral transition, we've had some changes of staff, and Chief Brophy, who we had a meeting with, has left the city. So we have a new chief of operations who will be overseeing the project. And some of you may know him. His name is Dion Irish, and he was a former inspectional services assistant commissioner. He was a former elections commissioner. He's been with the city for a long time. He's very much an ally of the disability community. So I have not reached out to him yet. I was letting him get settled in his role, but I will reach out to him in the next few weeks to talk about the plaza. But just to reemphasize to everybody, access is probably the main goal of this renovation, and it's being looked at every step of the way, and we are still committed to having people come out and do a site visit once the weather gets nice. And then my last update of old business is the bike plan. We do have grant funding to work on this outreach campaign. So I've been meeting with a consultant who does like media campaigns and outreach projects, and we just got a proposal from her. So my staff and I are currently reviewing the proposal and hoping to hire this firm to do the bike outreach plan. And when we do, we will definitely be convening a group of residents with disabilities to talk about their issues with safety and bicyclists. And we'll be reaching out to disability organizations and others in the community to get input in developing the plan. We're hoping to roll it out in probably June, if we can get this contract finished hopefully soon. And that's all my old business, if anyone has any questions about any of those items. Elizabeth?
Yes, just a quick refresher for the advisory board that the issue about the City Hall Plaza was that we requested, we want to request that there be a reevaluation a year after it's completed so that we can give formal feedback. And Chief Brophy had made a verbal commitment to that, and that was in the process of being put in writing. So naturally, given the change in offices and positions, that we now need to, that's what we'll be seeking from the new chief of operations. But with the commissioner's help, I think that that will go smoothly, but I just wanted to remind people, since it's become somewhat old business for a number of other intervening important reasons, but that's what the nature of it is.
All right. The other piece of old business that we have is working on, we'll continue to work offline on the questionnaires for the candidates for office for Boston.
I think I was due to send out a poll, so I will try to work on that in the next week.
Okay.
So that was
cool.
another piece that I meant to update you on, so thank you.
All right, great.
And how were you, Commissioner McCosh, how were you gonna send that poll out?
I was going to do a Google poll, but
Okay.
you know what, I don't have, that could be the actual tool, so I can just send out categories in like a Word document. Why don't I do that?
No, I mean, you can do it in SurveyMonkey or whatever, I just needed to, is this the poll for the disability community at large, or just for the commission to start with?
No, it's basically the questions for the candidates. So I just
Right.
wanted to cover the different topics that you're interested in getting information on. And I don't know if anyone uses Google Poll or Google Survey, but it's so easy to use. You don't have to sign up for like SurveyMonkey.
Okay.
And, but I would like to get feedback from you, Carl, on if it's accessible. So I'll follow up with
No,
you
that's fine.
offline on that.
Google for the most part is, so why don't you give it a shot, and if it's not, I'll let you know.
Okay, great.
Awesome. All right. New business. Do we have any pieces of new business that we want to bring up?
I do have one piece of new business that I wanted to raise, and that is I wanted to see if the advisory board wants to write a letter to welcome Mayor Janey as the new mayor, and also to maybe outline some of your priorities as an advisory board. And if you're interested, if you'd like to vote on it.
I think that's a great idea, Commissioner.
I think that's a fantastic idea.
I'm all on board.
Do I hear a motion to write a letter?
Yes, motion to write a letter.
I second the motion.
Yeah.
Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
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 All right. Passes
I actually
by
have
voice.
I have a template from when Mayor Walsh was elected. The board wrote a letter back then. Carl, I think you were on the board, you probably remember that. So
I do.
I can pull out that template and send it around and we can update it. I don't know if we listed priorities on that, but if you want to start thinking about priorities, we can put a paragraph in about that.
We can mention the captioning ordinance. We can mention
City Hall Plaza.
City Hall Plaza.
Yep.
This will be a great opportunity for us to get our foot in the door and
Vaccination, even though we're, you know, and,
Yep.
and sidewalks, there's a lot of things we can mention.
yeah. Yep. Okay. Public input. Do we have any input from the general public?
Yes, hi, this is Dave Vieira.
Hello.
Thank you very much for recognizing me. Somebody's got their speaker on, their reader speaker on, so I might not be heard. Commissioner, thank you for bringing up the subject of the bike program, which is why I'm here tonight. If you're going to have something confirmed by June, you're going to not be able to do anything for this biking season. I brought this up for the last 2 years regarding the bike situation in Boston. I've heard several national and local news reports over the last 2 months that bike shops are being emptied by the public because they want to be out and about. More bikes are going to be on our streets this year than ever before. And we really need to move forward on this bike safety protocol for the safety of the pedestrians of the city. And I hate to keep bringing it up, but by the time anything happens this year, the bike season will be over. And we are going to be overwhelmed by bikes on the city streets. And we need to involve everyone in safety protocols, parking protocols, and all the other things that are necessary to keep pedestrians safe in the city. So I'm passing that on to you because this cannot continue to be delayed and put off.
Thank you, David. I do appreciate your comments, and I know you've been talking about it for a long time. I do apologize. We do have a very small staff. We tried to do it internally. I think I sent you the draft. I just didn't feel like that was comprehensive enough for such an important topic, because we know it involves safety for people with disabilities. And I would just like to very, very respectfully disagree that I don't believe the bike season will be over. I don't believe we'll be missing it at all. I know people are on their bikes now. It's April. But June is only, 6 weeks away. So that's a very aggressive timeline from the point of view of the company I'm working with. And it's a substantial amount of money that we're going to spend on this. So it's going to be a very, very comprehensive plan. And as you said, the bike lanes are being installed. People are buying bikes and making investments in this type of transit. So they're not going away. So we're going to roll out this campaign in June, hopefully, but it's not going away. I mean, the company we're hiring is going to do the initial launch for us with the materials that they develop, but we'll own the materials. Like, we'll own the presentations, we'll own the pictures, we'll own the video. So we're going to be able to promote those everywhere from now until, whenever we decide not to. So it's going to be like social media, it's going to be on websites, it's going to be my staff doing presentations, like with colleges, with even bike groups that do charity rides. There's so much place, so much to do, and so many places to do it, that I honestly don't think we're missing the boat as far as the bike season. June will be really probably the main kickoff of the bike season, and then we have the whole summer, we have the whole fall, and like I said, we have the rest of time to get the campaign launched. And I completely understand and appreciate your frustration, because I know you've been talking about this for a long time. But I would like to reassure you, like the Copley Library, that we've been working on it diligently, and I think that you'll be very happy with the results.
And Commissioner, I respect all the work that you and your staff do, and I don't want you to think that that was just throwing out a criticism at you, because I know you've got a lot of things on your plate. But I almost got ran over the other day again. And, it just seems that there's no end to the issue because we're not doing what you're proposing to do. So I hope that this program gets online as soon as it can, and we'll see what happens. I do also want to make the point that I think we should go back to a Zoom format. This format has a lot of background noise to it, unless there's people that are not muting themselves, because there's been somebody with a text reader on for most of the conversation that's gone on tonight, and it's been very disruptive. So I just want everybody to know that they need to be responsible for their own background noise. Thank you.
Thank you, David, and we will be looping you in for the input on the bike plan.
Thank you.
Elizabeth?
Yes, just for a quick point of clarification, for the letter to the mayor welcoming her, is that going to proceed? I know that we have the prior one to work from, but I know that there's an element of wanting to do it with a certain timeliness, as well as highlighting, as Olivia did, some of our both priorities. But
Yes, I will make that a priority, Elizabeth. I will commit to that. And Sarah is on the call. Again, I'm going to lean on Sarah because a lot of my staff is not here tonight. So hopefully Sarah can send me a list of my to-do items, and I will prioritize that one. I already actually pulled the letter out when I thought of it a few weeks ago, right after our last meeting, so I can just send that. I'll actually change it just to Mayor Janey's name and things like that, and update it, and then you can add your priorities. So I'll get that out by the end of the week. I have a lot of time tomorrow where I can work on it.
Okay, well, one thing I learned for myself is I think I'm a better editor than starting a draft from scratch before we had an Arlington template when we were, so anyway, but thank you for doing that among the many things you're doing.
Okay. Do I hear a motion to adjourn?
First,
We don't want to adjourn. I make the motion to adjourn.
Okay, second?
second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right, great meeting, everyone. We'll get to some work over email and look forward to constructive back and forthing.
Thank you, everyone.
Great job.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.